Hi, and welcome back to the channel. I recently sat down with David Field, who's a financial planner and the founder and owner of Papyrus Planning. Dave works with people who are getting ready to retire or who are already retired, helping them with their financial planning needs. David's practice has a particular focus on retirement income strategies. And as part of his business, David spends a lot of time talking with retirees about the Canada Pension Plan program, which is a very important pillar of Canadians' retirement plans. And in our discussion, we talk about a number of topics. One of the things that Dave has done, which is very unique, is he actually created a very useful tool that can help you plan out or understand exactly what you should expect from the Canada Pension Plan program and the impact of the timing of the decision of when to take the Canada Pension Plan. So we talk about the program, the Canada Pension Plan program. We talk about the work that David did on the Canada Pension Plan Calculator. We talk about Canada Pension Plan timing decisions. We talk about the application process for Canada Pension Plan and a number of other things. I was very excited that David agreed to do this interview. I hope that you enjoy it. And with that, on to the interview with David Field. So maybe we'll start with, the first question, which is like, Dave, can you talk a bit about, what is the Canada Pension Plan benefit? Maybe talk us through how the program works at a high level to start.
Sure. The Canada Pension Plan is something that every working person in Canada from age 18 and above must participate in. So it's not an option. If you're receiving a salary from an employer or your business, then you're contributing to the Canada Pension Plan. Often people will think of it a little bit like a tax because it's being collected through your tax returns. But that's just how they collect the money. It has nothing to do with where the money goes. So, the revenues or the money is separate from government revenues, and the money is pooled together and invested by a separate investment board, and is strictly for providing the pension benefits. And also the CPP also has some additional benefits like disability benefits and death benefits in there as well. When you want to receive the Canada pension, it's all based on when you want to start it. So you can start it as early as age 60, or you can delay it all the way to age 70. So basically, the longer you wait, the larger the benefit will be. The program incentivizes you to delay it.
Yeah.
And that delay can actually be quite substantial. So, if you delay from age 65 to 70, that could be a 42% increase in your benefits. Of course, you would forego collecting benefits for 5 years, and you'd have to find some other way to live by not taking that money. But it can really increase the amount if you live a long time.
And this is really like the big question that as planners we come across a lot with clients, which is like, what is really the right time for me to take it, right? Like if people know they can take it as early as age 60, sometime maybe the knee-jerk reaction is, hey, if I'm able to get this benefit, I've been paying into it for a long time, I'm going to take it.
Right.
But maybe talk a bit about, when you're approaching a situation with somebody who's, getting ready to retire and trying to figure out where CPP kind of falls in their plan, like what are some of the things they need to think about, and maybe how important is that timing decision for their retirement plan?
In planning your retirement, the greatest challenges that both as a planner myself that I have and that you would have is you have no idea how long you live, right?
Yeah.
And then if you have a spouse as well, then you also have no idea how long they'll live. So then that just multiplies the complexity of making this decision, right?
Yeah.
So the financial risk really isn't that you die early. The financial risk is for the others who depend on you, right? Or vice versa. If your spouse dies, then the risk is for you, right? One question I think that a lot of people don't really think about is, what is your financial risk if you live longer than you expect, right? And often people will cite how old, average age lifespan, right? As well, I'll die by age 82 or something like that. But someone who reaches retirement actuarially has a much higher likelihood of living past the average because they haven't died in the previous 60, 70 years of their life, right?
Yep.
So their likelihood of living even longer is higher. So you have to, really work to kind of protect against that. There's a lot of factors that have to go into this decision, right? So, if you're not healthy and you've been told by a physician that you can expect to have a shorter life expectancy,
Mm-hmm.
then you'll probably want to take your benefits as early as possible. If you're of a very low income or expecting to be, quite low income in retirement, and by low income, that means probably earning less than $21,000 a year,
Mm-hmm.
then you probably want to take your CPP early because it could affect other
The benefits.
government benefits, right? Outside of that, you want to see how you can possibly delay the CPP as long as possible, just because it's that one program that everyone in Canada has access to
Mm-hmm.
that can provide you that um, protection against living too long.
As you age, right? Like if you're 65 now or you're 60 years old or whatever age you are when you're getting ready to retire, like you still have all of your, like you're still sharp, you understand how to look through a financial plan, you understand how to read investment statements, you understand the trade-offs between risk and return and the role that different income sources play in your income plan. But I talk also about, like, once you get into that third decade or second even decade of retirement, you're in your 70s, you're in your 80s, like, the nice thing with those guaranteed income sources is that they just hit your bank account. Like, you don't really have to, like, you almost kind of reduce complexity by increasing the role that those guaranteed income streams have later in retirement, so that you're kind of maybe simplifying things sort of.
No, I think you're exactly right. I mean, I think whether it's the Canada Pension Plan or it's your pension plan from work or an annuity you would purchase, just knowing you will always receive a certain amount of money is a huge comfort,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I think like when people retire, there's a panic that kind of sets in at first. Like
Mm.
they're about to have their income that they've always depended on just stop.
Yep.
And now they have to get that income from somewhere else. And usually in retirement, that's coming from many
Yep.
places, right?
Yep.
And I think that can cause people to have a short term. I got to get money from somewhere, so well, Canada Pension Plan, right? And it's a very natural place to want to look, right? You've
Mhm.
paid into this all those years, and so it at first glance makes sense. But I think you really want to have, when you're deciding about Canada Pension Plan and even old age security, when to take those,
Mhm.
you want to have a long term focus, I think, or a long term perspective on the income you're going to need, right? So if you have a workplace pension and you have a lot of things providing you that income, you don't need more baseline income, then maybe you don't need to delay your CPP. But most people do not have all that, right? So the
Mhm.
CPP can be your way to create that higher baseline by
Mhm.
delaying it and then using other sources of income to um, create that boost at the beginning that you want
Yeah,
for spending.
that bridge, yeah. So we're talking about, the importance of the timing of when to take CPP, and we're kind of like talking about also some mistakes that people might make when they're thinking about when to take it. And the idea, the one that I see is like people have a hard time thinking about, hey, I'm going to draw down on my portfolio or the money that I've saved up so that I can delay, right? And it takes some work to kind of show them, hey, like here's the long-term impact to your income plan over the next 2 or 3 decades. Is that a mistake that you see people making, and what other mistakes do you see people making when they think about when to take Canada Pension Plan?
Yeah, I think that's a big one. I think I think there's a view that if you don't spend your own money, obviously you hold on to it longer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's true, obviously you would, but if you look at money in your RSP or in your RIF,
Mm-hmm.
it's it's all taxable income, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to take it out early and use it and then use your CPP as that inflation protected buffer over the rest of your life,
Mm-hmm.
yes, you might maybe run down your RSP sooner, but you have that CPP to carry you on, right?
Yeah.
If you do it the reverse, take your CPP early and you have your RSP,
Mm-hmm.
you may still end up with longevity spending it all anyways,
Yep.
but now you don't have the increased CPP and that inflation protection to carry you on
Yeah.
later on, right? So, I mean, obviously, if you think you have such a large RSP, you're not going to spend it all. So you want to keep it in there and growing tax sheltered. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's a strategy. But if
Mm-hmm.
you die with a lot in there,
Mm-hmm.
it's all taxable, right? So you're going to lose a lot to tax.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's no straightforward answer is the problem, but just having a default is not the way
To approach it.
to approach it. Yeah, I mean, I think and I think that's one risk too. Is often someone's working with a coworker or a friend, and their friend made a decision one way or the other,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's a mistake just to think that even if you work for the same place and you have the same income and
Mm-hmm.
everything seems very similar about your lives, no two people have the same life and the same goals, and
Mm-hmm.
so you definitely have to analyze that. It's a big decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
Someone's retirement can go 35, 50 years perhaps, right?
Totally. Totally. So yeah, that's a really good lead into the next question, which is around like how much benefit can we expect? Because not everyone's going to receive the same benefit. The maximum that a retiree who's 65 today and is getting ready to collect the benefit, the maximum monthly pension is around $1,250 per month. But very few pensioners actually receive the full maximum benefit. So can you talk a bit through like how that calculation is made and how benefits can differ between different pensioners?
So the calculation is based on contributions from the time someone is 18 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to the maximum benefit, it's assuming basically that you've contributed the maximum throughout your working life. So that
Yeah.
when you retire and start your benefit, you've had maximum contributions that whole time.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that's very unlikely
Mm-hmm.
and is that if you were 18 and you went to some sort of post-secondary,
Mm-hmm.
you're likely not earning maximums from 18, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have low income years, low contributions.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you go into the workforce full time, you're probably not earning maximum. So that's going to take some years to get up to the maximum, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big reason why, you know, there's a lot of low contributions for someone who went to post secondary, right? And then if someone didn't do post secondary and went straight into work,
Mm-hmm.
it's probably not a career where you're maxing out the whole time, right?
Yeah.
There's obviously exceptions to those two cases, but I mean, it's something you find out a lot too is people who immigrated to Canada
Mm-hmm.
after the age of 18, it's still based on their contributions from age 18, right? So they would have a bunch of zero contributions until they started contributing. So
Mm-hmm.
in all those cases, it's very rare that someone has maximum contributions. Now, I mean, the formula that they use is they allow 17% um, of the months that get calculated into the calculation to
Mm-hmm.
be dropped out. So that works out to about 7 or 8 years that you can drop out either low contributions or zeros, right? So
Yeah.
that's the part of the formula that gets people up to the maximum, right? So where you have very low people that would qualify by taking out 7 or 8 years of low contributions,
Yeah.
often people will sometimes be able to get to the maximum. But that's also assuming that they haven't had any additional years,
Yeah.
uh, where they're between jobs or, whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
it is quite rare.
And are there other situations where you can drop years out of that calculation over and above that 17% dropout period?
Yes. So the most common is there's a child rearing dropout.
Mhm.
So that allows someone to, if they've received, um, you know, certain child tax benefits and
Mhm.
qualify,
Mhm.
they would be able to drop out those years where their children were under the age of 7.
Yeah.
So that, for one spouse, that will often um, be a huge help. The way, if you have a lot of low contribution years,
Mhm.
the way to increase that is basically working past age 65. So if you work past age 65, those years from 65 to 70, each
Mhm.
year can replace a prior year that was lower.
Okay.
So that's another way you can kind of increase it. Just means you're working longer.
Right. And in your experience, because you do a lot of work with people helping them analyze, what they're going to get for Canada Pension Plan, like what percentage of people that you come across or cases you come across are people that are going to get the full 100% benefit just in your own travels?
It's not very often. I mean, maybe 3 or 4% of people might.
Really? That
Yeah,
low, eh?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. I
Wow.
mean, it's funny because when I was doing my learning to become a financial planner, I mean, they almost assume everybody's earning the
Yeah,
maximum, but it's
for
very
sure.
rare. Yeah, yeah.
For sure.
I
For
mean,
sure.
it's not that hard. It is definitely possible.
Mhm. It's not
It's unheard
commonplace.
of, but yeah, it's just
Yeah.
to assume it's the default or to assume that's what you're going to have is very low percentage.
You actually created a tool to help people calculate what their Canada Pension Plan is going to be, the CPP calculator. I use it. Can you talk a little bit about the tool and why you built it and the problem that you were looking to solve when you put it together?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the I didn't know it was a problem, but eventually, I realized that, you know, people weren't receiving the maximum, right? You
Mhm.
couldn't just go by the defaults. And I also, more importantly, realized that the estimates that you can request from Service Canada,
Mhm.
they assume an average contribution rate. So
Yeah.
they basically just take what you've contributed up to this point and average it out and assume that will continue to age 65.
Mhm.
And that's very rarely, people will retire early, people lose their jobs. People maybe earn higher incomes than
Mhm.
they, later in life than they were when they were younger. So to use the average just is very inaccurate. So
Mhm.
I eventually discovered a man by the name of Doug Runchie. He
Mhm.
used to work in the administration and education of the Canada Pension Plan, and when he retired, he set up his own practice where he'd help people calculate
Mhm.
more accurately than you could get from your statements the
Mhm.
exact benefit. So I started using him to create those numbers and in the plans I was doing for people. I just approached him and said, would you be interested to kind of partner and maybe put together a calculator so that it can help more people and that eventually when you want to retire
Yeah.
completely, you this is still available for people.
The tool is great. Like it's fantastic. It's very easy to use. I've used it in a number of cases to kind of help enhance the plans that I'm doing for clients.
Okay, good.
Um, and so, can you talk a bit about if somebody wants to use, and I'm going to include links to the CPP calculator. If somebody wants to run their own calculations for their own retirement, like what do they need to gather, and where do they get that information?
Yeah, probably the easiest way is to go through the My Service Canada account. So it's not the CRA account. There's a separate My Service Canada account,
Mm-hmm.
and the easiest way to log into that is probably through your financial banking institution.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you log into that, and then you go and you find your statement. If you're able to save it as a web page or an HTML file,
Mm-hmm.
then that can be imported directly into the CPP calculator, so it automatically fills out all the information.
Yeah.
If that's either too technical or you requested a paper statement by calling the toll-free number for Service Canada, then you can enter them manually, and
Mm-hmm.
you just enter that in, and then you customize. It's basically the past is the past, and the future is what you anticipate your earnings to be, or your contributions in the future to be. So
Mm.
once you do that, it'll run based on when you decide to stop working or not, and we'll calculate all your from age 60 to 70 if you start at different dates what your amount in current dollars would be.
Yeah. And it's amazing. Like when you see the output, you can see just how big of a difference it can make to your long-term income, like the impact of waiting, right?
Right.
And like again, like there's of course situations where people should start earlier. You mentioned a couple, but like I think that the coolest thing about the tool, it just gives you very clearly that output line that says, look, if I started at 60 and then I contrast that to starting at 70 and then I blow that out 20 some odd years, like the differences are gigantic, right? And
Yes.
it's just such a huge decision when you think of it in that light. And so when I kind of show those visuals, like it's eye opening that people are like, wow, this is a really important decision that I need to make sure I make the right one for sure.
Delaying it, yes, percentage wise is 42%, but in real dollars is 100 or $200. Maybe that's not worthwhile to you
Mm,
to delay it, right? But in real dollars, if you can add $500-600 to your monthly income
yeah.
every month, and then that's inflation protected, right? That inflation protection is then on the higher amount,
Yeah.
right? And where inflation was not really a consideration, nowadays it's a big consideration, right? So
Totally.
in real dollars, it can make a huge impact, um, knowing what those differences are. So
Yeah.
again, it's very I see all kinds of numbers and calculations, and
Mhm.
it varies widely. So
Yeah. So can you talk a bit, Dave, about the process to apply for CPP? Like what's involved in that and what's that process look like?
yeah, I mean, it's something that you can apply for either online through the My Service Canada portal or website.
Mhm.
It's also something you can do. You can download the form. I'm sure if you call the toll-free number, you can request it.
Mhm.
The form is ISP 1000,
Okay.
but it's a pretty simple form. You basically say when you want to start the benefit. Uh, if you want to be safe, you probably want to send that in 6 months in advance.
Okay.
Do you have to do 6 months in advance? Not necessarily, but if you really want to start on a specific date, then you can have it, and then it will just start when the date you input
Okay.
on. And then in that form is your opportunity if you did want to take advantage of child rearing dropouts. Well, you might as well, right? It'll be recalculated. So if you've had children, then you put their dates of birth, and they'll recalculate uh, your benefit based on the information you put in there. If you don't put it in there, they have no idea about how many children you have or not. So
Okay.
you won't have the dropout. But other than that, it's not a largely complicated form to complete.
Okay. Maybe can you talk a bit about the survivor benefit? So if someone's retired and they are married and one spouse passes away, the some portion of that benefit it's possible they could lose a portion of that income, right? Or it's likely that they'll lose a portion of that income. But can you talk about what Canada Pension Plan offers to pensioners and their spouses when one member of the couple passes away?
Yeah. So the survivor benefit is paid out either to the surviving spouse or to children up to the age of 25. Um, the amount for children is a different calculation than that for the spouse, but a spouse, it's basically based on the surviving spouse's age.
Mm,
So the amount is, if they're below age 65, then the amount is calculated a certain way, and then if they're over age 65, then it's calculated another way. So, regardless of whether the surviving spouse starts their CPP or not, there will be a recalculation at age 65.
okay.
So often it'll be talked about, merging, you know, if after age 65 and the surviving spouse is receiving the benefit and they're getting the survivor's benefit, um, then there's a quite complicated there's people don't realize there's like an A or a B circumstance.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
either way, the A or B circumstance, whichever is lower is the one you'll receive, right?
Yeah.
So it's pretty much guaranteed that once you're um, receiving your benefit and you're getting this survivor's pension, then there will be a reduction in income.
Okay. So I'm at my last question, Dave.
Okay.
And so there were recently some enhancements made to the CPP program. Can you talk a bit about the enhancements, why they were made, and what the impacts are for people who are working still, what they'll notice now on their pay stubs, and for people who are going to be retiring in the future, what is it going to mean for them?
Sure. The CPP enhancement that started in 2019, it basically takes the concept of, the original Canada Pension Plan was intended to, on a rough level, replace 25% of someone's working income in
Mm,
retirement. And the enhanced is supposed to bring that up, trying to bring that up to about 33%.
mhm.
So that's the purpose of it. And what people will notice on their pay stubs that they will notice higher contribution amounts, uh, both from themselves and their employer or through their business to uh, make these contributions.
Yeah.
The For someone retiring immediately, like there's a couple stages to these enhancements and that sort of stuff. So if you're retiring in the next 5 years, every year you delay and every year you have maximum contributions. So these contributions are for people above the current um, YMP, the yearly monthly
Yeah.
punchable earnings, right? So you have to be earning above that. So for people who are high earners and contributing that extra maximum, you will see a little bit increase in your benefit amount, and the CPP calculator will calculate that for you. The second stage of these enhancements start to roll in 2024 and 2025. So again, at that point, there'll be even larger increase. But again, within the next 5 or even 10 years, it's really being gradually implemented over the next 40 years, right? So if you're 40 years away from retiring,
Mm,
then you're going to get that full maximum benefit. If you're somewhere in between,
mhm.
like us,
Like
then
you and me, I was just going to say we might get some, but
you're gonna have a higher benefit, but it's not
yeah.
going to be uh, up to that full like 33% target.
Okay. And is it just that um that the government said, "Hey, like we just need to make sure that people are better set up to replace their income in retirement. People are living longer lives. Like we need to maybe encourage people, or not really encourage, but kind of force them to save more." Or is there more kind of reasoning behind the spirit of the enhancements?
Yeah, I don't really know the exact motivations, but I mean, I think it was something that was being pushed. I remember by the Ontario government at the time,
Mm,
and I think it's mostly savings rate was not high enough.
mm,
A lot of people had higher debts, that sort of thing, at that time, right? So it's kind of a snapshot in time. It was viewed that people were not saving enough, and then how do you bulk up that savings, right? So if you can have the employers and the employees both contributing, and for those people who don't have a workplace pension, again, this is their sole source. So I think the idea was to actually try and replace that void of pension income, give people more ways to save and or force them to save
yeah, for
so
sure.
that they have more available later.
For sure. Like what are some of the big myths that kind of come to you often where you're like having to sort of correct people or correct people's assumptions or maybe educate them the most when it comes to CPP in particular?
I think one of the myths is just around the viability of CPP, right? So
Yeah.
there's and I think there back in the 1990s there was an actuarial risk
Mm,
that the CPP would not be there for everyone when they retired, when they
mhm,
needed to collect.
mhm,
And so they made a lot of reforms in the 1990s, created a separate investment board where they invest it like a pension fund would. So, and really modeled the CPP after, private pensions that had these investment boards and advisors. And so it's really, and then they bulked up the contribution rates.
Mm.
So the CPP is in a much different place, in 2022 than it was back in the 1990s. So,
Yeah.
I think there's an idea that you should start it right away so that you get it before it goes away.
Mm.
And I think that's not something that should be concerning people.
Thanks for tuning into my interview with David Field. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will speak with you soon. Take care.